So before I begin my presentation, I would like to thank all of the full-time and part-time music faculty at College of the Ozarks. A big thank you to the Carol Christopher Foundation, the Pamela Fortner Foundation, and the Choral Club accounts for the amazing opportunity to study a virtual workshop. It was the Choral Pedagogy Institute. This is like going to be much different than Nathan's. Nathan's more of an internship. Mine is like a full in-depth, like I sat on a computer for 8 hours a day and got lectured to and loved like every minute of it. It was really fascinating. I'm a nerd, and then Landon and Ben will kind of give you their experience with getting to perform with an amazing ensemble. So, I had the pleasure of studying with Westminster Choir College for their Choral Pedagogy Institute. I learned everything that I didn't know I needed to know about being a choir director, and honestly a musician in general. Like, this is not just for people that want to study voice, although it is helpful. It was applicable to me in my piano playing, in my vocal studies, and in my conducting, and pretty much in all areas. But this institute was run by Dr. James Jordan, who is like one of the big choral superpowers in the world right now. He's so, oh my gosh, he's like a celebrity to me. Again, I'm a nerd. Dr. Bodica, who's also on staff at Westminster Choir College, Dr. MacArthur, who as well as at Westminster, and then Dr. Everly, who was fascinating because he got his degree, his undergrad in MT, and then his master's in collaborative piano, and then his doctorate in, I believe, choral conducting or something. He's at Boston Conservatory now. He was actually getting moved when he started. But enough of that. Let's actually get to the presentation. Okay, so this was based on Edwin Gordon's music learning theory. I won't go too in depth about that. You all might fall asleep, but it's just a super fascinating theory, talking about how important audiation is, or hearing music before you begin to sing it. And Dr. Jordan's book, Inside the Choral Rehearsal, I forgot to bring it today, getting out the door, but it's this massive red textbook. Has numerous great resources in there. Okay, so a quick overview. I won't go in depth on all these slides. I have so many slides I have to move fast. But the most fascinating thing is Edwin Gordon on his deathbed before he passed away said that preschool children know more about learning than adults know about teaching. And I kind of found that as like a hit to my self-esteem a little bit, that, you know, a small 4-year-old child can learn better than I can teach. But it's so true when you think about how our brains are wired to learn things. So I found that fascinating. The anatomy of vowel was Dr. Everly's presentation, and I found it so applicable to everything I'm doing in all my choral ensembles at College of the Ozarks. So, for example, the jaw and lip position should follow tongue position, meaning you have a fat tongue, pretty much. And it takes up a lot of space in your throat and where you can really get a lot of your sound from. And oftentimes it's kind of neglected in the world of choir. So all of you in Choral remember last night singing Nothing Ever Can, Nothing Ever Will. And we sang it the first time, and it was like, pretty mediocre, I would say. We're just getting the sound. And then he does 3 things, and it completely transforms the whole entire sound. He looked at our jaw, he looked at our lips, he looked at our tongue. The first thing he did with the tongue is he had us go on vowels only, so nothing ever, So pretty much doing that so that your tongue isn't moving with the consonants and all that stuff. So that transformed that. And then with the jaw, he had us do this number, so we're aware of what's going on with our jaw. And then with the lips, he talked to us a little bit about having open vowels. And boy, I tell you, when we sang it the second time, I was kind of just knocked back for a minute. I was like, did we really make that big of an impact in like 3 to 5 minutes? But it really is so true in a choir setting. So check out this map. There are a couple of different vowels, and for tongue placement stuff, because I just mentioned how important it was, for your students that are like kinesthetic learners or like hand signs and stuff, something fascinating and helpful that he taught was, I'll take this hand and it'll be like the closed mouth. So think of it as like a closed mouth and the tongue in the back. So the first thing is the E, A, Ah. Can I have you guys repeat that with me? Kind of put up your hand like this. I'm seeing so much good classroom participation. This is great. So E, A, Ah. And then it's the same thing for U, O, Ah. So it's the same thing. I find it to be extremely helpful when I'm singing my pieces if I'm not, the certain vowel doesn't feel right or doesn't sound right. A lot of times it does have to do with my tongue position and what's going on there. Okay. So, music aptitude. This is for all of my elementary vocal music ed majors that are interested in studying the kids. You have such a big job. You have these small children that know nothing about music, and your job is to teach them. And the fascinating thing is that music aptitude is your potential, what you can perceive like your musical achievement down the road. Your musical achievement is what you can do currently, and obviously that can be affected by practicing. But your aptitude levels out at the age of 9. So, if you think about that for a minute, if you didn't have any musical exposure at all before the age of 9, which is highly unlikely, you are like so much further behind than everyone else around you, at least musically. So a way to kind of help this, being an elementary educator, is there's a certain test to give your students, and I know tests aren't great, but if you give it to your student once when they're about the age of 5, that's a beginner's aptitude test. Once at the age of 7, it's an intermediate, and once at the age of 9, or any time after 9. Like when you're 17, it's so insane to me. You're going to score pretty much the same thing as you will if you're 10 or 9 on this aptitude test. So it's like $1 per student, and if you get 100 students to take this test, like your whole school, like Dr. Jordan was talking about when he was in high school, or he was in middle school and elementary school a little bit. But if you can get over 100, it's even cheaper than $1 a student. So I found that helpful. Okay, so now for real this time, actually stand up. We're going to go through a quick poll. So this is going to be a little bit different. We're going to do the whole breathe in for, out, or breathe in for and out for. And what you want to do is pretend like he said a beach volleyball, but this thing, I saw Miss Reed with this and I just couldn't pass this up. So you can breathe in 4 counts, ready? And now even just put your arms out like this, just to make it really nervy. And so you're engaging kind of your core, and when you're singing, and you're beginning to get ready for singing. So repeat after me for a second. Up. So get out your little paintbrush. Bloop, 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 bloop. Wait, we'll try it again. Bloop, 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 bloop. Bloop, 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 So I will kind of demonstrate that a little bit on the piano. What it's going to sound like. So that is great. We will continue on to the second part of that one. But what I just did with you guys, you can free grab the seat again. I know it's very fast. I have to keep this relatively short. But without even mentioning it, I just got kinesthetic learners to focus. I don't know why I'm doing this with my grade. I just got kinesthetic learners to like visualize like a little paintbrush dabbing on. And what I'm really doing is I'm trying to get them to, I wouldn't call it necessarily a staccato sound. The goal is for it to be more marcato, but in doing so, you're doing all these things with your students and they don't even know it. And a lot of times, like doing what I'm doing up here and using kind of large words is like super unproductive for students at times. So that's something I'm trying to get better at as well. But let us go on to a little bit of vocal pedagogy here. I'm trying to get this relatively short. Oh, and we're back now.
at is from a really cool program called Visible Body.
Is this describing what happens when you're breathing?
The other one that we have access to at Rider University is called Human Atlas, I believe. And in the Human Atlas, it shows all of the different systems in the body, but the muscle premium only shows the muscles. And what I like about this one is it actually shows you the action of those muscles. And so here we're looking at specifically rib elevation, but it will also show us a little bit about what happens with rib depression. So when I click play here, you'll start to see everything move. Obviously, this is the sternum, what's highlighted in blue, and then these are all of the ribs. And then along the side. We talked about our two floating ribs. You can see them down here at the bottom. That's rib 12 and rib 11. Notice that they don't attach to anything. We come around back to the front view. We can see that rib 10, 9, 8, and 7 all feed into this common cartilage that then goes into the sternum. The upper ribs have a much more direct attachment. So you'll notice that in this process of rib elevation, they don't move nearly as much as these bottom ribs do. There's a lot of movement happening in here in the floating ribs. To the side. And a lot of movement happening at the bottom of the rib cage in the front, or anteriorly. This also right here is the diaphragm. You can see its superior bulge happening up really quite high in the body. You can see if you come from the bottom that it does attach to all of the ribs on the side. And you can see the two central tendons coming down into the lumbar spine.
So, something kind of fascinating about that video I thought was that as singers, a lot of times we really emphasize the diaphragm, and a lot of times teachers tell you, breathe down from your belly, down here. But really, the diaphragm is pretty central, I would say, and relatively below, not too far below the rib cage. So they like to talk. They mention it looks a little bit like a toilet plunger. Not that that really matters at all, but that just thinking of it as that little disc that just like that. So we were going down. So I won't go super in depth to talking about that, but. Now let's talk a little about vocal warm-ups. A fascinating thing I found is even for the most foundational vocal warm-ups, there are still potential negative things that can happen with that. So I'm really only going to go over the bad, I'm sorry, but I found it insightful to say the least. So with lip trills, you can do this in many different ways. So for example, if I was to just go, you probably can't squat. And then if I think really forward and kind of easy. So you guys may not have heard it, but I felt it in here. The second time I intentionally tried to grab and do exactly what you don't want to do. But when you're showing some singers that may not be super familiar with singing, they might have that tendency for that to grab, especially your tenors and sopranos if you go high enough. But let's see here. So something fascinating I found was during Dr. Everly's presentation, he was talking a little bit about the conductor and the responsibility of the conductor with the ensemble and the integrity that they have to hold within the ensemble. So the conductor has to ask a ton of different questions. The most interesting I found with the breath gesture was that when thinking about it, it must invite the sound that's to be made, so the timbre, the dynamics, there are a million different things, even just in that one point. So, for example, if you're doing a really slow piece and your preparatory gesture is, well, you're probably not going to get either a great breath and you're not going to get the style you're looking for. So that's just kind of a little bit of how that goes. So I talk about empathy a little bit, and what does that mean for a choral conductor? It's having realistic expectations that are also understanding. So you might have this idea in your head with an ensemble, okay, I want them, we're going to perform at MCDA and all these other really cool choral things, and really it's just a group of beginning choral singers. That's really not unreasonable, I would think. And so giving your students grace whenever they're singing and letting them know it's okay to make mistakes really makes singers feel welcome. So keep that in mind. So Mr. Cornelius actually briefly touched on this first point in Choral, which I found kind of ironic. But he said, to do away with the my part philosophy, what does that look like? It means I'm a tenor and only a tenor. I won't do anything else for you but be a tenor. And I can be so much more in an ensemble than that. I can be a leader, I can be a person, I can be a shoulder for someone, or an ear to listen to someone who might be having a problem. Or it's listening to the ensemble as a whole, so the whole sound, instead of just thinking, my notes are ba-da-da-da-da, it's thinking about this really cool harmonic progression going on with the whole ensemble, and listening to everything, and looking ahead in your music, and thinking about what that's going to sound like, and where my parts are going to fit in the ensemble. Listening is so important. It is the most important thing in music. I don't even really know how else to put it. Like, if you're not aware of everyone around you, your intonation is going to suffer, and you're not really ever going to experience the full joy of the music and the joy that the composer is wanting you to have in composing that piece. We'll quickly go over standing arrangements. I really want you guys to have time to present, because I know it's going to be great. Thanks, man, for that. The standing arrangements were very extensive, definitely not over the top, because it's going to affect how your choir sounds in the long run. But I said it's the first thing you do in rehearsal, and it's really not. The first thing you want to do is figure out which person's singing which part. But once you have that all figured out, and the range and all that stuff, you can start doing standing arrangements. So, what does that look like? My Country 'Tis of Thee is a great way to look at that. What you want to do, and this is kind of a terrible picture, but you want to have an alto, soprano, tenor, and bass formation. 4 rows all the way across. He said you could do this for up to like 120 singers. Then you need to start kind of doing the columns, and I have tenors over here, and basses over here, altos and sopranos. But if that's not the case, most of you probably aren't going to be working with ensembles over 120. Like, just being real, you're going to want the 4 rows. So, what does that look like? You want your model singers, is what he described, to be in the middle. So, you want your women's sound to come through your altos, that's why they're in the front. You want the sopranos to kind of have a similar tone as the tenors in that it's a light, spinny, lyrical tone that matches and it blends really well with the members around them. So in the middle of the formation, you want your model singer. So if I have, I'm just going to use a random name, Barbara, who just got into choir and has never sang a note in her life, and really is still making progressions, but isn't the most comfortable singing by herself, let alone really even in an ensemble, I'm probably not going to want her in the middle of my room. So the last thing I want to talk about is vulnerability. It's kind of one of the most important things being a choir director. I briefly mentioned on it before, but you want your singers to feel welcome in the room. There's such a realness and almost a sacredness to being in a choral ensemble where everyone is welcome. Kind of going in depth with that, I freak out so much as a future educator that students are going to think I'm fake or not being genuine. But really what it's about is loving one another. And what does that mean? It means serving them in every capacity I can. So if I have a singer that needs help with math homework, and oh man, I'm not great at math, but I have the ability to at least help them understand that, I'm going to do that outside of the rehearsal. And I'm going to be giving a lot of myself to my students. What does that do? It builds trust, it builds relationships, it builds character, so many different things. But I'll kind of end with that because I don't have that much time. Gracias.